The crosscourt law. Two opponents trade ground strokes under the sun, yet almost every ball curves diagonally across the net. Strange, isn't it? The straight line seems faster, shorter, deadlier. So why do professionals keep choosing the longer way? The answer hides in geometry and probability, the quiet mathematicians of tennis. When researchers at the French Tennis Federation tracked over 10,000 baseline rallies at Roland Garros, they discovered a stunning pattern. More than 60% of professional shots go cross-court. It's not superstition or style, it's science. The diagonal across the court measures about 18.3 meters, nearly a full meter longer than the straight baseline. That extra distance expands the margin for error by nearly 8%. A wider landing zone means fewer misses, longer rallies, and better control of pace. But geometry alone doesn't win matches. The net itself plays accomplice to this secret. At the center, the net dips to precisely 3 feet high. Near the posts, it rises to 3.5 feet. That 6-inch difference shifts the odds dramatically. When players strike cross-court, the ball travels over the lowest part, slicing risk by nearly 1/3. Down-the-line shots, however, flirt with that higher edge one mistimed fraction of a degree, and the ball clips the tape. Still, there's more to this story. Patrick Mouratoglou, mentor to Serena Williams and Stefanos Tsitsipas, calls it the first rule of tennis intelligence. After every cross-court shot, professionals recover not to the exact center but roughly 50 centimeters toward the side they just hit. That subtle step rebalances geometry again. It places them equidistant from both possible replies, a short angled counter or a sudden line strike. Recreational players often miss this by standing dead center, leaving themselves stranded when the next ball arrives wide. Watch slow motion footage of Djokovic or Alcaraz, and you'll see the rhythm. Strike diagonally, glide half a meter sideways, settle early. Their movements sync with mathematical precision, almost musical. This single rule defines how rallies unfold, shaping everything that follows because where you stand next decides whether you attack or survive. And that secret positioning leads directly into the next truth: why the best players in the world almost never stand in the center of the court. The positioning code. Every beginner hears the same advice: hit the shot, run back to the middle. Simple, right? Yet every professional does the opposite. Watch Federer, Djokovic, or Swiatek in slow motion. After a rally ball, they don't run to the middle line. They stop a few steps off it. That tiny shift changes everything. Back in the 1980 seconds, Australian coaches began charting player movements with chalk lines during training. The data looked odd. The best players always stopped about half a meter from center after hitting cross-court. When asked why, most couldn't even explain it. Their bodies had learned it instinctively. Years later, computer analysis confirmed the pattern. Standing slightly toward the side you just hit shortens recovery time by up to 18% and keeps both sides equally open. Think about what happens if you stand right in the center. Your opponent has two major replies: a sharp angle back cross-court or a fast line shot. From the center, you're too far from that short angle. You'll chase the ball off balance, late to recover. But if you shift just 50 centimeters toward your shot, both paths take nearly equal steps to reach. The math lines up perfectly: equal distance, equal reaction time. Patrick Mouratoglou calls this positional balance. He says players who ignore it lose control of the rally before the next ball even comes. In 2011, when Novak Djokovic rebuilt his game with coach Marian Vajda, they focused on recovery spots more than stroke mechanics. Djokovic began finishing every shot with a single sidestep, always ending a little off-center. That small change turned him from a top 10 player into a world number 1 within months. He covered the court faster, anticipated better, and looked almost untouchable. Ball tracking data from the 2023 ATP Finals proves this pattern still rules modern tennis. In long rallies, over 70% of recovery positions landed outside the midline zone. Players who drifted too central lost the point 40% more often. Every inch matters. This principle turns movement into prediction. It's silent geometry at full speed positioning before the opponent even hits. And this awareness links straight into the next secret: how champions find and attack the weakest part of every rival's game. If you're learning something new, hit subscribe and stay with us. More pro-level secrets are coming your way. The Weakness Hunter. Every great player begins a match with the same mission: find the weakness. The search starts in the first few rallies. Professionals use those early points like radar, testing every corner until they spot a crack. Once they find it, the rest of the match becomes a quiet hunt. In 2008, during that famous Wimbledon final, Rafael Nadal aimed 62% of his shots at Roger Federer's backhand. Federer, meanwhile, sent only 54% toward Nadal's. That small difference changed tennis history. Nadal's team knew Federer's one-handed backhand struggled against high-bouncing balls on grass, especially when pulled wide. They planned every point around that detail. Therefore, the pattern was no accident. It was data-driven pressure repeated hundreds of times. Patrick Mouratoglou often tells his students that professionals treat every opponent like a math problem. Before a match, they study heat maps, shot speeds, and preferred rally zones. In one ATP study from 2019, analysts found that 73% of winners hit over 60% of their shots to the rival's weaker wing. The pattern repeats at every level, from junior tournaments to the Grand Slams. However, the method goes deeper than simply hitting to one side. Professionals mix ball height, speed, and depth. One rally might push deep with heavy topspin. The next draws the opponent forward with a shorter ball. This variation forces the same weakness to appear in different positions. Novak Djokovic uses this perfectly. Against a shaky backhand, he starts with long, heavy rallies cross-court, then snaps one flat down the line when the rival steps too far back. The sudden change creates instant collapse. Every top player studies this art. It's a mental game hidden behind physical motion, slow probing, data reading, then precise execution. Once they control your weaker side, they own the rhythm. And rhythm leads to the next secret: how they use ball height and court depth to trap you in zones you cannot escape. The zone attack. Every rally tells a story of space and height. The ball's position changes everything. Professionals know that weakness isn't only on one side. It hides in how a player handles different heights and depths. Therefore, they study how high or low an opponent prefers to strike the ball long before the first point. In the early 2000s, coaches at the Spanish Federation started tracking contact zones. They noticed something clear. Most players hit their best shots when the ball rose to waist level. Anything above the shoulders or below the knees dropped shot quality by almost 40%. That single insight shaped how Spanish juniors trained. They learned to hit high bouncing topspin to force rivals into awkward shoulder hits. It produced an entire generation of clay court masters, from Nadal to Federer. However, the same rule applies everywhere. On grass, the low slice becomes a weapon because it pulls opponents below that comfort line. In 2017, Federer used that tactic at Wimbledon. Against tall players like Berdych and Raonic, he sliced over 40% of his backhands, keeping the ball under the knees. Their power vanished. Each rally looked controlled. Even though Federer hit slower, ball depth plays the second part of this trap. When a shot lands inside the service box, the opponent steps forward and loses recovery time. When it lands deep on the baseline, they move back and give up control. Professionals switch between these two zones constantly. They push you back with heavy spin, then draw you in with a short, low ball. That constant depth change breaks balance and rhythm faster than speed alone. Every champion mixes both dimensions, height and depth, until the rival starts guessing. Once that happens, control shifts. The opponent moves instead of thinking. The rally becomes a chase, and that control of space opens the next layer of mastery: how players use geometry to create open court before the ball even crosses the net. The geometry master. Every point in tennis is a puzzle of space. Players at the top win because they see that space seconds before anyone else. Therefore, every angle they hit carries a purpose to move the rival, open an empty lane, and strike through it. Court geometry decides who controls time. When a player hits a sharp cross-court angle, the ball travels a longer path and pulls the opponent far off the court. Data from Hawkeye tracking at the 2022 US Open showed that when a shot lands within a meter of the sideline, the next ball has a 68% chance of being hit into open court. That's a huge jump in control. Professionals use this pattern as a setup tool, not just a scoring one. In the 1,990 seconds, Pete Sampras used geometry better than anyone. He often played a wide serve on the ad side, watched his rival stretch, then placed the next shot to the empty half of the court. Simple in idea, brutal in effect. Every step his opponent took wide opened about 15 feet of free court, almost the length of a small car. Modern players like Iga Swiatek and Carlos Alcaraz have refined this with sharper angles and heavier spin. They shape the ball like artists, pulling opponents out until recovery becomes impossible. However, the clever part comes after creating space. Professionals don't rush straight to finish. They pause, wait for the rival to move, and then hit behind them. That sudden reversal freezes movement. Statistics from the ATP Performance Zone show that hitting behind earns 22% more points in long rallies than aiming directly at the gap. Everything in geometry returns to control. Every wide shot creates choice: attack the open space or trap with a fake gap. That calculation happens in seconds. Great players read it early, move fast, and force errors without hitting harder. The crowd sees power. The reality is math in motion. This geometric control leads perfectly into the next secret: the moments when champions dare to change direction and break every pattern they built. The direction changer. Every rule in tennis has its moment to break. The cross-court law rules most rallies, but great players know the exact second to go against it. Therefore, when a ball suddenly flies down the line, the crowd gasps not because it's risky, but because it's perfectly timed. Patrick Mouratoglou once said that a player should change direction only when conditions align. He pointed to 3 moments that make it safe and deadly. The first is when facing an opponent who moves poorly from side to side. In 2019, Daniil Medvedev used this against Dominic Thiem in Shanghai. He changed direction 26 times during the final, forcing Thiem to cover both lines, and won 73% of those points. Each shift stretched Thiem's movement pattern until his defense broke. The second reason to go down the line is rhythm. Rallies become predictable after 10 or 12 exchanges. When both players expect another cross-court shot, a sudden line drive flips the balance. Matteo Berrettini built his entire tactic around this. He would rally cross-court with heavy topspin backhands, then slice one flat down the line. That ball, slower but deep, gave him time to run around and unleash his forehand into open court. However, the most powerful reason is opportunity. When an opponent runs wide and exposes open space, the window to attack is short, usually under a second. Roger Federer made this moment an art form. He often took the ball early, before it reached its highest point. That early strike stole time from his rival and turned defense into offense. The direction change works because it carries surprise, data, and timing in one motion. Every player trains to hit cross-court safely, but champions train to break that rhythm with precision. Each line shot resets the rally like a plot twist, and from that moment, a new battle begins: the war to control time itself. The time thief. Every rally feels fast on screen, but in truth, tennis is a battle for time. Whoever controls time, controls rhythm. Therefore, when you watch the top players, you're really seeing experts in stealing and buying seconds. In 2012, Novak Djokovic explained in an interview that his main goal in every point was to take time away. He wasn't chasing power, he was shrinking his opponent's reaction window. When he steps inside the baseline and hits the ball on the rise, he cuts almost 0.3 seconds from his rival's preparation. That small number changes everything. Over a 5-shot rally, it's more than a full second stolen. However, there's a second half to this skill: knowing when to buy time. Rafael Nadal built his career on heavy topspin that pushes opponents far behind the baseline. Each looping forehand lands deep and jumps high, forcing the other player to wait longer for contact. In that pause, Nadal resets his stance, breathes, and prepares the next blow. His average rally ball clears the net by 1.2 meters, while many flat hitters barely reach half that. The higher ball gives him an extra quarter second on recovery. It's like bending time to his rhythm. Data from the 2021 French Open showed a clear pattern. Players who mixed early strikes with high-spin defense won 63% of long rallies. They shifted pace before the opponent adapted. Therefore, control over time matters more than pure power. This push and pull forms the heartbeat of modern tennis. Professionals learn to sense tempo changes like musicians. They slow rallies to recover, then strike early to break rhythm. When both players start trading time like currency, rallies turn into chess games at full speed. And this constant time control builds pressure, the kind that cracks even world champions when rhythm starts to slip away. The pressure builder. Every match reaches a point where both players know each other's patterns. Therefore, whoever breaks that rhythm first takes control. Pressure in tennis rarely comes from raw power. It comes from surprise, from rhythm change, from daring to play the unexpected. During the 2022 ATP Finals, analysts tracked rally tempo across hundreds of points. They found that when players changed pace mid-rally, switching from fast, flat exchanges to slower, looping ones, the win rate jumped by 21%. The reason is simple. The human brain likes rhythm, and once it locks into a pattern, even small shifts cause hesitation. In that half second of confusion, mistakes appear. Novak Djokovic uses this better than anyone. In matches against Carlos Alcaraz, he often plays 2 fast cross courts, then suddenly slows the third with a high topspin ball. The opponent steps forward expecting another fast shot, but the slower one floats higher, breaking timing. That single pause resets the rally. Djokovic steps in and finishes with a flat drive. Therefore, pace variation becomes both defense and attack. However, pressure isn't only about speed, it also hides in shot height and spin. In 2013, Andy Murray's coach Ivan Lendl made him practice mixing rally tempos every 3 shots. Murray would hit 2 deep, flat balls, then 1 looping topspin, then slice. The goal was to keep the opponent uncomfortable. Over that season, Murray's forced error rate against top 10 players dropped by 19%. Players used disruption in every way possible: slower serves, surprise drop shots, even long pauses between points. Each change pulls the rival out of rhythm, increasing stress with every shot. Once the rhythm breaks, mental pressure builds fast. Tennis at its core is timing under stress. The player who controls tempo controls emotion, and when emotion cracks, even champions lose balance. That mental collapse leads straight into the next secret: how players use psychology to win matches long before the final point. The mind game. Every point lasts seconds, but the battle in a player's head never stops. The mind decides matches long before the final ball. Therefore, the smartest players win because they control emotion and rhythm between points, not during them. Rafael Nadal shows this better than anyone. His routine before every serve looks obsessive, but it has purpose. The towel, the water bottles, the same sequence every time. It builds focus and blocks pressure. In 2010, sports psychologists studying Nadal's matches found that his service accuracy jumped 14% when he completed his full routine without interruption. That rhythm protects him from nerves. However, it also frustrates his rivals, who must wait, cool off, and think too long. Opponents try the opposite tactic. Novak Djokovic sometimes rushes between serves when he feels the opponent's frustration building. The fast pace forces rushed thinking. In contrast, Daniil Medvedev slows the game deliberately, walking back between points, staring across the net, stretching the clock. Both methods aim for the same goal: to break the other player's comfort rhythm. Body language plays a huge part too. When Roger Federer missed an easy forehand, he turned away calmly, no reaction. He once told reporters, "If I look angry, my opponent grows stronger." Sports data confirms this pattern. Players who show visible frustration lose the next point 33% more often than when they stay neutral. Therefore, the calm face becomes a weapon. Mind games appear even in shot choices. Some players attack an opponent's strength early, giving a false sense of control. Later, they switch to the weak side when it matters most. That sudden shift feels like the ground moving. It breaks confidence instantly. Every serve, every pause carries a story between the lines. The crowd sees rallies, professionals see psychological traps. And those mind traps form the bridge to the final secret: how all these elements link into one complete tactical system that explains every match ever played. The tactical synthesis. Every tactic we've talked about lives inside a single rally. Therefore, what looks like a reaction is really a prediction built from years of patterns. Professionals link geometry, rhythm, psychology, and timing into one living system that never stops moving. During the 2019 Wimbledon final, Novak Djokovic played 55 baseline rallies, longer than 9 shots, against Roger Federer. Analysts later found that in 47 of those rallies, Djokovic followed the same hidden sequence: cross-court, slight reposition, deep ball to backhand, short angle, then early line change. It looked random, but it followed a silent formula. That repeatable structure gave him full control of rhythm and space. Federer, famous for improvising, started reacting instead of leading. Every elite player builds their own version of this system. Nadal plays with topspin and left-handed angles. Djokovic builds his own balance and anticipation. Federer builds his own first strike control. They all follow the same cycle: open the court, exploit the weak side, change direction, steal time, apply pressure, then finish when the mind breaks. However, the secret isn't only in the order of moves, it's how quickly they adapt that order under stress. Hawkeye data from 2023 showed that top 5 players change rally patterns 36% faster than those ranked outside the top 50. That ability to switch tactics mid-point separates champions from everyone else. Tennis at that level turns into pattern memory and instinct. Every step, every spin, connects to the next move. The viewer sees power, the player feels rhythm. Each stroke becomes a sentence in a long story that builds pressure until one mistake appears. Therefore, every match we watch from local courts to the Grand Slam finals follows the same invisible script. Geometry, positioning, time, and psychology merge into one machine. Once you start seeing these patterns, tennis no longer looks random. It becomes organized chaos built on data, history, and precision, the real language of champions.